the different transformations you go through when you've lived in so many countries. Different countries, different continents, different cultures. You're born in one culture, you belong to another culture, you've lived with another culture or in another culture. And this shows in the way you speak. So, for example, you may start off with the native accent. Don't you know that you are not supposed to do that? You need to go home right now, and you need to talk to your mother and your father. And then you transition to, but of course, I wouldn't be here, would I now? If you hadn't had the common sense to call me, I wouldn't have been here at all. And then you move on to, but you know what? I think we are just gonna get along fine, just fine, because we're together. And then you move on to, I'm a kya, and then you rectify it to, आप क्या कर रहे हो भाई? And then you fix it more by, आप कर क्या रहे हैं? जरा मुझे बता सकते हैं? And then you move on to, or rather graduate to, तो होर ਅਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ? ਅਸੀਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਹਾਂ। ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਜਿੰਨੀ ਦੇਰ ਤੱਕ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਿੱਖਦਾ ਉਨੀ ਦੇਰ ਤੱਕ ਉਹਦੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੁੰਦੀ। ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਉਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜਿਹਨੇ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਵੇਖਿਆ ਉਹ ਜੰਮਿਆ ਨਹੀਂ। This was just a little bit of fun. Basically, for my friends out there who are part of the Learn Urdu community and also part of the Learn English community, since I kind of teach both. Ciao! Transitioning accents, transitioning towards dialects and languages incorporated based on our experiences in life as we live in different countries, different cultures, different continents, and are exposed to all of them, even if we haven't lived in them. Now, many people thought that I should have had the Pakistani English and the Indian English added to the transitioning accents. Well, this is part 2. We can begin with that. Let's see. The Pakistani accent is normally very neutral, but sometimes you get to hear the hard retroflexed T and Ds, and it also depends on the region that you're in. If you're in Karachi side, you would normally hear a more pseudo-Indian accent, and if you go upper north, you will hear more the Middle Eastern English version. Yeah, oh right, I kind of got that there. That is the standard Pakistani accent that you get to hear. But if we move towards the Indian accent, obviously, now that is a very distinctive accent, you see, because there you can truly recognize that an Indian is speaking the classic Indian English, if I may say so. And you know, it is a whole English on its own. It definitely is. It can be categorized the way Bollywood is categorized. You know, a whole category of its own. And now we transition towards incorporation of different languages in today's, in our modern speech patterns. As we know, we have incorporated a lot of English into Urdu and a bit of Urdu into English. And there is a lot of incorporation of French and German words in English and Persian words as well. And obviously Urdu is made up of Persian, Turkish, Arabic, and Sanskrit. So there's no surprise there. If we did add, there's no surprise there that we would start adding English as well. in the modern Urdu conversations. Um, and then when you have the strange fortune of having lived in various countries, or if you've had the very good fortune of being exposed to the different cultures um, around you, and you realize the similarities, you tend to incorporate those words more and more, even though you may actually never even use those languages in your life, but because subconsciously you have picked on them and you have your brain has sort of stored them. Um, so subconsciously you have actually learned those languages, even though consciously you need a subtitle for them. And you find yourself looking for words to communicate in one language, and you literally have to pull out different other words from different languages. You have to sift through them just to find the word you're looking for, and then at the end, you just end up with no vocabulary in the language that you're currently communicating in. And this happens a lot with us, those of us who are multilingual, parce que nous sommes essentiellement multilingues. We, those of us have who belong to cultures where there are always more than one languages, we are automatically bilingual. And then when we learn global languages, we become multilingual. So those of us who live in Asian countries and African countries, we are already bilingual. So when we start learning international languages, or if many countries have a third language, which is usually their official language. So when you get to start communicating in that, then you automatically become uh, multilingual. And that's very good for your brain and your tongue, actually, because you get to exercise your tongue a lot. That makes it very flexible, and it makes it even more easier to capture more languages or to get your accent um, modified whenever needed. And obviously, it's good for the brain because the brain needs to constantly learn and adapt and develop. And I think it also shows us how we add to the development of a language and maybe into the making of new languages. Because essentially, in a nutshell, that's how languages were made, you know, uh, and that's how new dialects were formed, and that's how accents were formed, and that's why in different we may notice that in different languages we tend to use the same words or similar words that have the same meanings. For example, now in Urdu you have chai, in Punjabi it's cha, and then you move on to Korean, Japanese, and Chinese, and they call it cha. So chai, cha, cha. It's really interesting, isn't it? And it's fun to know. And although strangely, cha is also used for car in Chinese, and I think also in Korean, I forgot. Well, and then we have the most common word hi. So hi hi, I mean that's Japanese, yes. Ha, that's Urdu and Punjabi, yes. But if you hi in English, that's hello. But there's another hi in Urdu and Punjabi, and that is similar to the Korean I go. So in Urdu or Punjabi, you will hear mostly words like hi hi. So hi hi is an expression of pain or remorse or despair, and that's your I go in Korean. And it's one word used so many ways in so many languages. It's sort of reminds me of you see, right now what I'm going through is the exact same thing that I'm telling you about. When you're looking for a word in the language that you're communicating in, and you can't find it because all the other words that have nothing to do with whatever it is that you're trying to say start swirling in your mind, and suddenly you will remember the Sindhi word kape, which has nothing whatsoever to do with what I'm talking about, except for the fact that kape is a Sindhi word used in the sense of, long live, um, and it's like how in Urdu you would say Zindabad, you know, um, and yet instead of looking for the right word that could be explained in maybe Japanese or Chinese or Korean, the other word that is in fact just coming to my mind simply because it's very similar to the word kape, although it has no relation to the word whatsoever. That's kambare. I mean, kambare is and more in the sense of courage, and fighting, and it's that. It has nothing to do with kape. But whenever you think of the word kape, for some weird reason you associate it with gambare. You know, um, so these are the sort of funny things that go on in one's mind when one is exposed to so many languages at a time. Uh, it's annawa. I'm trying really, but the word majal, that word would come out. I'm still trying to sift through all the different words. But yeah, oh, that reminds me. There's another word that has that same feel. Um, in Japanese, there's a word kizo, right, which is come, and oddly enough, in Hausa, one of the Nigerian regional languages, kizome is also to come. We used to play this game when we were very young, where we would call for this really tiny insect that is supposed to stay hidden in the soil and it only shows itself when it's about to rain or something. I think if I remember right. And it was called kurkutu. So it was kurkutu, kurkutu, kizome sharua. So whenever I hear the word kizome in Japanese, for some odd reason, I immediately remember the Hausa word kizome because they both sound the same and they actually mean the same thing. So it really started making me wonder, how is it that they share the same word for the same thing? I mean, you've got Africa on one end and you've got Japan on the other end. But it's interesting. So, but I think despite the fact that we may not utilize most of the languages that we're exposed to in our daily lives, but suddenly sometimes when we're having a conversation, these alien words, they incorporate themselves into our speech patterns, and we may come across as show-offs or pretentious jerks, but um, it's actually pretty normal. It's natural, unless of course you are doing it deliberately. But I mean, most of the time we actually feel embarrassed. We're like, oh my god, I was trying to say this word and this word came out. Now somebody's going to ask me, do you know Korean? And I'm going to say, no, I don't really know Korean. And it's like, why the hell did you just say that word then? but but actually, it's not that we don't know these languages. As I said before, we have actually learned those languages on a subconscious level. And one of the signs that you've actually learned something is, or a language, is when you dream about it. So if you find yourself dreaming in a certain language, according to linguists and experts, it means that you have fully um, incorporated that language into your mind. So this is, in a way, this helps when I'm teaching my students on learning Urdu speech patterns, or when I work with English, spoken English sessions. Because I think the secret to practicing any language is um, losing that hesitation that we have, because essentially that is all it is. It's a hesitation, and that hesitation comes from the fear of being wrong, or from the fear of being mocked. And you have to sort of bring that confidence back, that it doesn't matter if you speak English wrongly or if you speak Urdu wrongly. It's not your language in the first place, you know? At least you're speaking it. I mean, how many people can comfortably speak Urdu or Japanese or Korean, you know? So why should it be taken for granted that Koreans and Japanese and Chinese and Pakistanis and Indians should speak English perfectly? Or, you know, the Germans and French speak English perfectly. The English don't even know how to speak Deutsch, and they don't know how to speak French even most of the time. I mean, they're essentially just a one language people. So believe me, they're not going to make fun of you if you try to speak in their language. If anything, they'll probably just respect you all the more and be impressed and be a little happy, because they have no idea that um, we're here juggling with various languages at a time. They just have one language to work with, and only if they choose to do they, you know, gain knowledge of another language. So yeah, we tend to make everything into a complex. It's not really. The fact that, I mean, see, a language remains living when it keeps changing and it keeps diversing and it keeps developing. That's a living language. Otherwise, it becomes a dead language. And the only way that you can keep your language alive is when you add unique patterns to it and make changes to it. And these changes are automatically going to occur based on your experiences and based on the environment and based on your exposure. And yeah, some people may argue that you're offending a language or insulting it when you incorporate other languages, and that you can't even complete one sentence in that particular language. But in a way, I think it's not negative. It's not offensive. It just shows that your brain is ready, and that, oh yeah, it may also show that your brain is a little overburdened because it's so busy trying to juggle all the different languages for you. But no, it also shows that your brain is working. It's really working and it's active and it's fine. So that, and that it has these various options for you, so that if you do forget the vocabulary in one language, it can at least help you recover by getting it in another language. I mean, you know, think of it that way. So I think the way our lifestyle and our different environments and the different cultures we're exposed to gets reflected in our language says a lot about us, and it's a positive thing. It's something that we should not try to negate, but it's something that we should accept, and we should in fact try to work on, you know, consciously. So subconsciously we've learned a language, we're actually even dreaming in that language. So consciously, maybe why not let a few words pour out, you know? It all doesn't matter. So well, that is it for now. I hope you enjoyed the transitioning accents and the various dialects, and although I did try to stick more to English to make it a little, you know, but you know, c'est la vie. कदी कदार दूजे पासे जाना भी चाहिदा है। जरूरी नहीं कि तुसी हुण सिर्फ इक्को लाइन दी कीड़े वांगर खलोते रहो ते उत्थे ही चलदे रहो। सीधी लाइन ते जरूर चलो, टेढ़ी मेढ़ी ना चलो। ते मैनूं सख्त जहर लगदे ने ओहो जेहे लोग जेह्ड़े टेढ़े मेढ़े चलदे ने। सीधी राह ते जाया करो। The beauty of uh, Punjabi right there. You sort of don't realize the beauty of Punjabi, it being one of the oldest literary languages in the world. You usually tend to think that you cannot speak Punjabi or will not speak Punjabi or cannot speak Punjabi until you've grown up It's in Lahore, especially when you start speaking Punjabi, it's as if you've officially graduated, you've become an adult. Now's the time to get your license. Yes. These are the quirks, you know. I think one of the reasons also why, despite the fact that our languages sound completely different from each other generally, the reasons why we can find so many similarities is because essentially somewhere way back, there is a part of our cultures that we all share. I'm talking from all the way from China and Japan down here to Nepal, all the way, yes, to Pakistan, India, Nepal, all this side, you, Bangladesh, even. We all have a lot of things that if you go into those really trivia, you know, you find that, oh my God, we share this too, we share this too. Yeah, we tend to speak like this too. We have these similar expressions, we have these muhavres, you know, these idioms, and we have these proverbial expressions. Yes, we tend to do that. And I guess that's one of the reasons how you find it very easy then to understand the language and to incorporate it. And then it becomes just the norm. Yeah? So just go with the flow and enjoy it and have fun. So what if you start in English and then move on to Urdu and then बीच में पंजाबी भी आ सकती है, बीच में French भी आ सकता है. Yeah, who knows? It doesn't matter. As long as you're getting your point across. So thank you everybody. Kumawa and shukriya. Alvida. Khuda Hafiz. Bye bye. Au revoir. Oh, and by the way, kappe in Japanese, banzai. In Korean, mansei. You know, it's like it probably originated from the Chinese or ancient China. On the record, it's said to originate from there in the sense of 10,000 years, which is roughly translated as long live. So, well, there you have it. Now, cheers, or should we say kambe or kampai? Well, in any case, adios, and till we meet again. Side note, cheers, as in bye-bye. That's not kampai or gambe, obviously, but just in case I needed to clarify.